Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am personally in Bangkok, so it is evening here. My name is Eliza Anyangwe. I am the managing editor of CNN As Equals, which is CNN's gender inequality reporting team, focusing on reporting deep dive stories on systemic gender inequality. You are joining us for a fantastic Plan CNN collaboration entitled Protecting Girls and Women Online. Are we doing enough? This event is the culmination of a year-long project or so that between CNN As Equals, CNN's gender inequality reporting team, and Plan International, who we noticed had done two fantastic reports in 2020 and in 2021 on the states of the world's girls, focusing in high levels on harassment and the abuse of girls and young women and gender diverse people globally. For the past year, Meera Senthilingam, who I will also be introducing shortly, has been running a series for CNN called Systems Error, focusing on how gender affects your life online. And we were really keen to hear from young women, and so initiated this partnership, which produced both some exceptional reporting, which you can find on the CNN platform, as well as an additional report from Plan International. And so we have convened this virtual event to discuss the new findings of the CNN and Plan report, to talk about the recommendations of the White House Task Force on Kids Online Health and Safety, and the Senate-approved Kids Online Safety and Privacy Act. And additionally, to get that perspective from what it would mean to move from policy recommendations to safety and action for girls. What was really vital with this report and this project from the CNN perspective was that we center young people's voices and we heard from girls, because of course, often in journalism, we hear from experts or from people who we would identify as victims, and not often from people who feel a bit more empowered and are asked their views on what things should be like, even though they're not in that way yet. But before we get started with that, we are delighted to have among us Jennifer Klein, who is the assistant to the president and the director of the White House Gender Policy Council. We're so glad to have you. Just to let everyone know, more in the I guess the British way of things rather than even the CNN way of things. I think it is in keeping with that that we have the conversation feel as casual as possible. So, Jennifer, I hope that you don't mind that I call you Jennifer during the course of this conversation. All of our speakers are esteemed and highly acclaimed, but we will call them all by their first names here. Jennifer has worked on domestic and global gender policy throughout her career and has advised the president on issues including reproductive rights, gender-based violence, and women's economic security. We will start with some opening remarks from Jennifer, and then I will introduce the rest of our panelists to talk about, the report, the reporting, and where do we need to go from here with women and girls online safety. So please, over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Eliza. And I actually want to start by saying that I completely appreciate being on a first name basis. My children went to school from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade at a school where they called their teachers by their first names, which many people, approach with consternation. Would they learn proper respect? So that is what is most comfortable to me and to my family. So thank you, Eliza, for that introduction. And I also really want to take a moment to thank the wonderful team at Plan International and at CNN As Equals for your leadership in producing this incredibly important and timely report. As Eliza said, I've had the honor of leading the first ever Gender Policy Council at the White House, which President Biden established in March of 2021 to advance gender equity and equality across the administration's both domestic and foreign policy. And one of the key issues that we focus on at the Gender Policy Council is online harassment and abuse, because we understand, as this report shows, that the online environment can be unsafe for women and girls. It's no coincidence that as access to digital devices among young people has steadily increased, including, of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've also seen an alarming and disproportionate decline in mental health and well-being among children and youth. And this has been especially pronounced among girls and LGBTQ+ teens. We also know that girls and LGBTQ+ youth experience online harms uniquely and in many cases more severely, and that there's often a blurred line between safety online and offline. And with the rapid advance of AI, new forms of online harassment and abuse have emerged. This includes image-based sexual abuse through AI-generated images, which has skyrocketed in recent years. And we know that women and girls are disproportionately affected by these types of images. For survivors and for their families, this abuse can be devastating, upending their lives, disrupting their education and careers, and leading to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and increased risk of suicide. Since the earliest days of the Gender Policy Council, my staff and I have met with survivors to discuss the very real impact on women and girls in the US and globally. We've spoken with high school girls whose classmates had created and disseminated AI-generated nude images without their consent. We've listened to women leaders who have reduced their social media presence or left elected office due to the volume of online threats. And we've heard from women journalists covering democratic elections who are targeted with threats, intimidation, and image-based abuse intended to silence their reporting. I feel like my video went off. Is that true?
Yes, that's right, Jennifer. We've lost you.
It says it's on, but it's not. I don't know. Is it okay if I keep going without a, okay.
So please continue.
So sorry. The report from PLAN and CNN is Equals provides us with the opportunity to further learn from and listen to young girls and women about their experiences online in 2024. Data from this report reaffirms the two key points that have driven much of our work to advance online safety at the Gender Policy Council and across the entire Biden-Harris administration. First, the online environment is not safe for women and girls, as 1 in 3 of those surveyed tell us. In large part, this is because online harassment and abuse is far too normalized. It's become a routine part of their digital experience, one that we cannot accept. Second, we must listen to women and girls, center their voices, and empower them to be the architects of their own lives, online and offline. As this report shows, young women and girls have a lot to say about the type of internet and world they want to see. And we owe it to them not only to help build that reality, but also to create the conditions for women and girls to be leaders themselves. With these points in mind, we're continuing to work day in and day out to prevent and address technology-facilitated gender-based violence and support kids' online health and safety. In May, we detailed the more than 100 actions taken by the Biden-Harris administration to enhance prevention, support survivors, promote accountability, and expand research and data collection on technology-facilitated gender-based violence in the United States and globally. Many of these actions are designed to help create healthier online environments for young women and girls and to counter the chilling effects of online harassment and abuse on women leaders. For example, the administration's strengthened protections for students who have experienced harassment, including online harassment and abuse, by issuing new Title IX final rule that clarifies schools' responsibilities to address sex discrimination and harassment, whether that conduct occurs online, in person, or both, and that strengthens definitions for sex-based harassment and stalking under Title IX to address the growth in technology-facilitated gender-based violence, including image-based sexual abuse. In July, the administration released the Kids Online Health and Safety Task Force report, which outlines key risks for children and youth, including the gendered impacts of digital harms posed by social media platforms. The report includes recommendations for parents, youth, and online platforms and builds on the work of the White House Task Force to address online harassment and abuse, which President Biden established in June 2022, out of the understanding that our approach to ending gender-based violence, including harassment and abuse, must evolve as technology evolves. And we understand that online abuse and harassment is not just an issue that impacts us here at home. And that's why the administration launched a 15-country global partnership for action on gender-based online harassment and abuse, which has advanced international policies, to address online safety for women and girls, and spurred new programs to prevent and respond to technology-facilitated gender-based violence against women in political and public life. Building on this work, at the 75th anniversary of the NATO summit in Washington in July, the administration was proud to launch Women Lead, Women Leading Effective and Accountable Democracy in the Digital Age. Through this initiative, the United States, together with 14 other countries and more than 30 civil society, philanthropic, and multilateral partners, have committed over $850 million to efforts that advance women's political leadership and counter gender-based violence against women leaders online and offline. Thanks to previous research from PLAN, we know that advancing women's civic and political participation is bolstered by efforts to support a safer digital environment. Young women and girls are seeing how women political and public figures are treated online and are recalculating their ambitions to lead. That's not a trend line we can accept, and we must work to reverse it. And so to do so, we'll need to fully harness the power of both the public and the private sectors. Technology companies can make choices to more safely design their products and actively address online harassment and abuse facilitated on their platforms. And governments have a responsibility to act. As the president has made clear, Congress must pass legislation that will create a safer, more accountable online environment for everyone, but particularly for young people. Congress must pass the Kids Online Health, Safety, and Privacy Act, which passed the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support earlier this year. And this week, as we celebrate 30 years of the Violence Against Women Act, the President and Vice President are clear that we need to continue fighting to protect women and girls from image-based sexual abuse, and this includes non-consensual intimate images generated by AI. We also know that the federal government cannot solve this problem alone. That's why the White House has called on technology companies and others in the private sector to consider the voluntary steps that they would take to help prevent image-based sexual abuse. Because there are multiple ways for companies to take voluntary steps right now to curb image-based sexual abuse across the ecosystem of harm, from the generation of images to the sharing, distribution, and even sale of access to non-consensual imagery and the tools to create it. There's so much to say here, more to say here, but I'll stop there. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about the report and the work that each of you are doing. And with that, let me pass it back to you, Eliza. And again, thank you.
Thank you. There was so much in there. And so I'm hoping that our speakers will now be able to speak to some of the things that we've heard said, but let me tell you who those speakers are. First, if you joined us while Jennifer Klein was speaking, welcome. Unfortunately, she had tech issues and so was not able to have her camera on, but hopefully you caught clearly what she was saying. If you haven't, then our speakers will have the opportunity now to reflect on some of those comments. Jennifer will not be staying on for Q&A, but we are lucky to have with us a member of her team. I've just got my bios up before me. So Kaylin Crockett leads the Biden-Harris administration's work on technology-facilitated gender-based violence and related AI harms, rather. Welcome, Kaylin. Our hosts, as this event is co-hosted by Plan International, Shana Marzilli is the president and CEO of Plan International USA. With more than 85 years of experience, Plan has worked to transform the lives of people in over 80 countries, and Shana brings more than a decade of experience serving Plan at the executive level. Also joining us today from Accra is Hikmat Sungdeme Sani, who is a digital creative and entrepreneur, a tech and gender activist who leads Pahibu Space, a youth-led and technology development organization in Ghana. Welcome, Hikmat. Linda Raftery is the Merle Tech Initiative founder and also the convener of New York City Tech Salon. Linda has worked at the intersection of community development, gender, youth participation, media, rights-based approaches, and digital development since 1994. Last but not least, my colleague Mira Senthalingam, who is the CNN editor working across all of our journalism, but specifically responsible for our CNN series Systems Error. She's an award-winning global health journalist, author, and editor with experience across journalism platforms. So welcome to you all. My first question to them, given the time that we have, we did start later than we would have liked, is to just take a minute to just reflect on the things that you heard Jennifer say. What most stood out for you? What would you like to bring to the fore in this conversation that we're having? Can I start with you, please, Hikmat?
Hello. Please,
Hello.
just to confirm, if you are able to hear, please, are you able to hear me?
We hear you clearly.
Okay. Thank you so much, Elena, for the opportunity and also for the wonderful introduction. My name is Hikmat. As Elena rightly said, I'm a digital creative, but I focus most on women's rights and equality for girls. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank Plan International USA and CNN as Equals for bringing us all together to address this critical conversation or topic. Online safety of girls and young women, a topic that has real daily consequences for millions of girls and women across the globe. The work you are actually doing to amplify the voices of girls and young women is vital, and I'm very grateful for it. And as mentioned in the opening remark by Jennifer, sorry if she has any title that I haven't actually mentioned, but Jennifer actually highlighted the fact that online spaces are meant to be places of learning, connection, and empowerment for girls and young women. However, we all understand there is no doubt about it. For many, they have become places of fear, anxiety, and harm. The statistics are staggering. Reading from the research report that was conducted by Plan International USA and CNN as Equals, the statistics are staggering, but behind every number is a real girl who has been harassed, abused, bullied, and exploited in a space where she should feel free. We need to be very clear that these are not isolated incidents. They represent a systemic issue that demands action from me, you, and everyone. I also appreciate the recognition that this problem is intersectional. Girls from marginalized communities, whether due to race, location, religion, or economic background and other identities, they face a heavier burden. They are more vulnerable to harassment and have fewer resources to protect themselves. This is something we can't overlook as we work towards solutions. And I think one of the things that actually stood out for me is the need for accountability. It's not enough to just talk about the issue, no. Tech companies, especially, and social media platforms, they need to take responsibility and create safer spaces online. Governments need to do more than just draft beautiful policies, design beautiful policies. They need to ensure that those policies or these policies that are actually designed to enforce and support some of the issues, especially regarding girls' online safety and abuse issues, they should be backed by solid data. And as individuals, we continue to raise awareness and push for meaningful change. Girls should not bear the responsibility of protecting themselves online. The burden should actually fall on those with the power and the resources to make these and spaces safer. From my own experience, for the past 4 months, I have actually been addressing and working towards reviewing literature on online sexual exploitation and abuse in West Africa. And it's an eyesore. You know, it's disheartening to see how little support girls receive from our governments and communities when facing online abuse. We need more data-driven policies, and we need investment in research that will help all of us understand the full extent of this problem. And as I rightly mentioned, this is a shared responsibility. Tech companies, governments, civil society organizations, and families, we all have a role to play in ensuring that girls can thrive online. And we here today especially must use this platform to push for urgent, meaningful action. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those words. Can we come to you, please, Shana? So the idea is that I'm asking all of our speakers to just reflect on the opening remarks we heard from Jennifer Klein. If any of the people in the audience have any questions, please do use the Q&A. Those questions will come to me and I'll be able to put them to our speakers. So as they come to you, please use the function of the Q&A to get your questions through. But please, Shana, from your perspective, what did you take away from those opening remarks?
Eliza, thank you. And I just want to thank you and CNN and Mira for your leadership and partnership on this important research, and for all the panelists for the work they're doing in advocacy around this important issue. And lucky me to follow Hikmet, who is clearly really experienced and deep on this issue. And I really appreciate that we're including the voices of young people here and that this issue is getting so much attention. I think what I heard from Jennifer is very consistent with what we've seen in the research from Plan International and CNN and from past Plan research. And it really tells us, right, that the nascent legislation and regulation in the US and Europe just hasn't been enough, and that more action is urgently required. Social media is still a dangerous and hostile place for children, especially girls. And girls are seeing what happens to other girls online and to women. And, it's a way of shutting women out of the public square and girls as well. If we think about some of the stats in the report, 75% of girls ages 13 to 24 have faced harmful content. Almost half of girls have received unwanted sexually explicit images. It's just, we need to move faster, and we need to move with the voices of young people. I love what Hikmet said and Jennifer about making policies that work, right, and that really respond to the needs of young people. Earlier this year, the U.S. Surgeon General actually issued a public health advisory citing studies that social media is addictive and is designed to be addictive. And we know that more than 40 of the state attorneys general agree with having a label. We see girls being driven to self-harm, like eating disorders and even suicide. And, it's not an acceptable place, and it's not getting any better. I think the report we're discussing today is, as you said, the third in a series of reports. And our studies have found that this online harassment also leads to stalking, sextortion, physical violence. And I think, as one of the young people who is involved with Plan told us, it's not, there's online and there's everything else, right? Everyone's lives are blended together, and we have to recognize that what happens online also has an impact in everyone's day-to-day lives.
Took me a minute to mute myself there. Wonderful. Can we come to you next, please, Mira? You, especially as a sort of counterbalance in that partnership, what did you hear from what the speakers have said so far?
I have to admit that the range and the breadth of things that Jennifer covered that they're prioritizing really kind of span everything that's really happening in this sphere, and the many ways in which women and girls are being affected. But for me, what kind of stood out from all of that was the fact that this real priority and need to make sure women and girls are keeping their voice at all times. So the fact that, they've been working with politicians who are kind of losing their kind of onus and desire to stay in the public as a public figure, the fact they're speaking to journalists, we've seen that throughout our reporting for Systems Error. We've seen kind of activists being silenced just for speaking out against powerful leaders. We've had stories about politicians in Uganda who are having to be trained to really be able to handle the trolling and endless abuse that they have, not just from the public, but from their peers. And we've reported our opening story from Myanmar was about people speaking out against the military, immediately being doxxed and silenced, and always in a sexual way, sexual nature. That's what we've seen across the series. And it's that all of that continuously happening is what is the future of women's voices and girls' voices. They're being silenced every time they speak out. And this report now with Plan has shown that this is happening as young as 13. They're being silenced and their whole life is online, and everything about the way they are having to engage and protect themselves from day one puts this immediate desire not to have to go through that for the rest of their lives, and then not be in the public and not speak out in the future. And that's what is a real priority with everything, with the legislation, with the way platforms need to act, with the programs like the ones Jennifer outlined needed to really work with women and girls to ensure they keep their voices out there. That's key for them remaining powerful in the future and having a voice in the way things shape in the future.
Thank you, Mira. And finally, can we get your reflections, please, Linda? Kaylin, because you work with Jennifer, I'm not going to ask you to reflect on what she said. It might be a landmine. Who knows how that will end for you? So we'll finish with Linda and then come to the rest of our conversation. Linda, what did you think?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm really glad that the administration is doing something about this. I think we've been talking for so long in the sector about the need for regulation. I just really see kind of the harassment of women and girls and LGBTQ people online as just a continuation of these kind of historical ways of telling certain people that they're not wanted in the public space. It's just like street harassment tells you that, how dare you go out in the street as a woman? You're not supposed to be in the street. You're supposed to be at home. You're supposed to be doing this thing, not that thing. And so it's just, for me, really a continuation of the kind of abuse and kind of punishment that women and girls and LGBTQI people face when they're being in a space that's normal for those who don't share those identities. And so I think we really need to keep fighting to make safe spaces for all voices, not as long as those voices are not infringing on the rights of other voices. So really, people who are thinking about, free speech advocates, oh, well, I have a right to my free speech. Well, if your free speech is causing someone else to not have their own space to speak out, then that's not okay. And I was recently at the Trust and Safety Conference back in July, which is a conference that brings together all of the people that are working within platforms on trust and safety issues, trying to keep platforms safe for people. Believe it or not, there are people within platforms that do care, that do want to, make safe spaces. And this was a big theme that was coming up at the conference, is that these teams are being fired, they're being downsized, they're being defunded. Which is a huge issue, especially as we go into the age of AI and we go into election cycles. We're seeing these huge issues with girls and women, LGBTQ, can't say my acronyms today, LGBTQI folks, being harassed. And I think it's especially a problem, as Hikmet mentioned, that there's really a lack of research in majority world countries on these issues. Most of the research, most of the funding, most of the decision-making is happening in San Francisco, in large tech companies. And there's very little investment that goes to keep platforms safe in other places. There's a lack of investment in languages in places that aren't seen as revenue generating spaces. And so this came up in some of the sessions that we were at, and really the need for more research, the more understanding of what trust and safety looks like in different contexts and different places, what kinds of harassment, not just general harassment, but what does that look like very specifically for girls and women and LGBTQI people in certain contexts. And so I think it's really important that we continue to gather and gain more information and to really pressure tech companies to put the resources in to keep their platforms safe, and to encourage governments to continue regulating in ways that can create rights to everyone to participate.
Thank you so much, Linda. Kaylin, can I ask you a follow-up question? When I was listening to those opening remarks, and really, as someone who lives in Europe, and seeing how the EU is approaching regulation, it's of course clear that regulation is important, but I'm constantly hearing from the tech companies, and we are all kind of being fed these messages that regulation is kind of the enemy of innovation. So as someone who works within government, how do you understand these two things? Are they in competition with one another? How do we hold human beings and their needs while at the same time thinking about these more sort of like esoteric ideas such as growth and innovation, right? How do you reconcile those two?
Are you hearing me okay? Am I coming in?
We are.
Fantastic. First, I just want to thank CNN and Plan International for this fantastic opportunity to dialogue on such a key and timely issue, and also apologize on behalf of the technical limitations of the White House that impeded the full visual of my brilliant boss and leader, Jennifer Klein, as she gave remarks. But it does sound like her message did come through, and that's what's most important. Thank you for that question. The president and the vice president have been very clear that innovation and regulation are by no means on the opposite sides of the spectrum. And I really want to come back to a point that Linda made, talking about, I think, the false binary between freedom of expression unbridled and really enhancing, strengthening, and creating in so many ways protections and accountability for harms that disproportionately impact women and girls and LGBTQI+ people online that don't really exist. This accountability doesn't exist in the way it needs to yet. Because when we think about the current status, the laissez-faire approach that we do have right now in so many ways, in the US in particular, where we still are awaiting, and the president has been calling for bipartisan accountability frameworks and laws to regulate the tech platforms, including the reform and repeal of Section 230, which creates that immunity from liability for harms facilitated by and on platforms. We are just perpetuating the existing power structures that keep women and LGBTQI+ people, and in all of their intersections of identity, out of decision-making spaces, including in the C-suite of tech companies. We know that we need more innovation, really led by people with lived experience on what it's like to be online and to not have the fully permissive space actually to express oneself online because of that chilling effect that PLANS research has so thoughtfully and compellingly outlined. In fact, it is the position of this administration and in partnership with many of our allies like the EU who've passed the Digital Services Act, colleagues and partners in the UK who've passed the Online Safety Act, that actually having reasonable common sense regulations will create more opportunity and space for a fully inclusive environment online that will enable more diverse voices to flourish and innovate, whether and in any domain or sector, including the tech sector.
I see your hand was up, Shanna. Please do jump in.
I wanted just to emphasize the point that both Linda and Kaylin made about this idea that it's so binary, right? We can either have innovation or be safe. We can either have free speech or be safe and online. And I think we're all saying, and I think young people particularly are saying, those aren't, binary approaches and ideas. And I think the thing that we have to remember in all of this is if young women really don't feel safe online, right? Like we're not going to have innovation in the sector that comes from young women or adolescents, where we're not going to have the voices in a free speech context. And I think that's why these regulatory frameworks like the Kids Online Safety and Privacy Act and other initiatives are really important, right? There's some accountability in there, but also recognizing that without this, we are going to be missing a generation of voices of young women because they will have been run off in fear of not only what's happening online, but what's happening in their day-to-day lives. And I think, with the Summit of the Future next week and UN General Assembly, it's really important that, we recognize this is happening in the US. It's also happening around the world. And, we need to keep the voices of adolescent girls front and center in this.
That's so true. Mira, if I was to wager, I would guess that you were going to talk about how we're seeing that in our journalism, right? That actually, it's not a kind of like unintended consequence, but actually sometimes, as you were talking about with the Myanmar reporting, a direct intention that, bad actors do not want women or LGBTQ+ people participating. But what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to add to the fact that a lot of the girls that we spoke to, because the benefit of this research was that we did the surveys, but also the focus groups. And through that, you really got actual insights and experiences from girls across these countries. And they actually had great ideas. They were really annoyed about being silenced, about having to make their accounts private. They wanted to be online. They knew they had to. They knew their future was online. but they were fed up of having to do everything themselves just to stay safe, trying to give themselves a future. And then when we covered and asked them for ideas about what's really relevant then that could be done, simple things, but also more complex things to make things safer for them online, they had a whole host of ideas, and most of them made complete sense and were relevant to each of their lives in different ways as well. So that was the key I wanted to build on, because it's mentioned about the need to include them in that decision making, and that's what we wanted to do with this report, was to get that insight about really what do they know, and here's what they actually think, and these are actually really good ideas.
Hikmat, what does meaningful inclusion for you look like, right? Because I love the fact that you're here, but I do not presume that us inviting you to join our panel is going to radically change things. So, and I'm hoping that many more of the engagements that you have are for more deeper, more meaningful. So what does it look like? Because I think a lot of the people joining this call might be working in civil society organizations or might be, adjacent to government. How do you want to be included in a way that's meaningful?
Okay, thank you so much for such an important question. As the last speaker, Mira, I don't know if I remember her name rightly, she mentioned that we must include girls in decision-making processes, because we as young people or those from the marginalized communities, one of the biggest challenges we face is the physical and power distance between the girls, us, most affected by online harassment, and the tech companies and policy makers in places like Silicon Valley. But actually, despite this gap, we have been using like meaningful ways to include voices, girls' voices in this conversation. One thing I will really want to emphasize on, which will make me feel like I'm included, or other girls, especially those from marginalized communities, feel like they are actually included in decision-making processes, things about their lives. We must prioritize local grassroots initiatives that give girls the tools and the platforms to speak up about their experiences and advocate for change. I remember when we were developing one of our projects called Secure Tech Sisters project on online digital safety and then literacy. We engaged the girls. We actually wanted to find out from them how they think social media is and what opportunities social media platforms offer them. And most of them, in as much as they want to use social media platforms for maybe accessing opportunities, creating their business and personal brands, most of them shy away, or they don't want to be on these platforms because they will end up getting bullied, depressed from unhealed people. So we must actually try our best to prioritize local grassroots initiatives. This means that partnering with local organizations and youth-led movements, because young people are leading global movements, creating the change that we all wish to see in our world. So we are already connected to girls in their communities. So if we are able to partner with local organizations and youth-led movements, we'll be able to create safe spaces, both physically and digitally, where girls can always share their stories and solutions without fear of judgment or retaliation. And my last point will always be on pushing for tech companies to actively involve girls in product development and policy discussions. More often than not, all these policies and programs or products are designed for us. We are the main users, but we end up not even contributing to these developments. So we need girls to be able to have the opportunity to co-create these policies, co-design these programs and products that are pushed back to us to use. And we can actually achieve this through advisory boards. We can use young people to form advisory boards. We can do this through focus group discussions, consultations that specifically include young women and girls from diverse backgrounds, especially those from marginalized communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Hikmat. Shana, because of course, in some ways, well, actually very directly, CNN as Equals approached Plan International because of the communities of girls that you worked with, because you have these sort of focus groups that you already convene, very similarly to what Hikmat was talking about. Do you have those same relationships with Silicon Valley so that you can be the bridge for young women in the way that Hikmat was asking? Like, who does that? Because, how do we form that bridge because of, as Hikmat said, the physical and power distances that exist?
We do, and we have. I think several years ago, we were actually successful in bringing the folks from Meta to the table to really actually hear directly from young people about current tools, how they do and don't work, and feedback that young people have. But I think it points to the importance, right? We know that Silicon Valley has a lot of power, right? And it points to the importance of working in coalition with people like the ones that are around this virtual table today through the White House Gender Policy Office, because it's, even though I think Hikmat's point that many of the users, a lot of revenue, right, comes from young people, they're not at the table in design. And it's 2024. Like, we can say, oh, wow, we didn't know these tools were going to have these consequences, but we can't say that going forward, right? As new apps and products are designed, there's no excuse for not having young people and not thinking about the unforeseen consequences of some of this technology.
Totally right. I see your hand up, Linda. I know because you also work so closely with involving girls and, centering their voices while safeguarding them. What would you like to add?
I just want to add that I think it's really hard for anyone to really engage with the tech companies because they feel quite distant and they don't always have representatives in other parts of the world that can make decisions. So a lot of the decision-making power is sitting with teams that are in San Francisco or in the US. And so even, periodically bringing voices in, I feel like it's good, but it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. And so, I'm really curious how to encourage, force, whatever you want to say, some of these companies to really and truly listen to civil society organizations, to young people who can bring them these real stories. I'm sure people are aware, for example, that, there are accusations that Facebook, back in the day contributed to genocide among the Rohingya. And so you think about, social media companies contributing actively. Twitter has recently been also accused of, contributing to really horrible violence in the UK at the behest of the key tweeter, the key Xer, I guess you would say now. And so really, how do these companies get held accountable for the real world damage and the real world harm that they're doing, not just to girls and women, but to other, communities? And I think it's really time that they took their role as almost a second state much more seriously. They have tremendous power, they have tremendous influence, they have huge amounts of resources. And I really think accountability is going to be very, very key going forward if we're going to really change things.
Well, Kaylin, can I throw that question from Linda to you? What does accountability look like? And I saw your hand was up, so perhaps you want to fold in other things you wish to say too.
Sure, absolutely. I wanted to really just talk about that accountability piece and also what more it will take very essentially to bring women and girls, and particularly young women and girls from low and middle income countries who are the least represented in the halls of power, whether that's in Silicon Valley, Washington, D.C., Whitehall in the UK, and elsewhere. I think the Biden-Harris administration believes, the president and the vice president believe that we need laws and regulations to level the playing field, to create the legal incentives and requirements, frankly, at this place for young women and girls and underrepresented voices to be at the table and to inform the design and enforcement of policies related to the function of these tech products and platforms. And one of the key reasons why we are so urging the House, now that they are back in session, to pass the Kids Online Safety and Privacy Act, which would create first ever legal requirements to have by default the strongest privacy and safety settings for young users, which we know would also just create a safer online environment for users of all ages. I wanted to also just note about the underrepresentation of majority country voices and communities in the research that we know on the scale and scope and harms posed by technology facilitated gender-based violence. This is something the administration has been very focused on addressing and filling that data gap. And so one of the things that we have done is our USAID, which funds and fields the demographic household surveys that provide some of that key globally comparable data for the types of gender-based violence that women and girls experience between the ages of 15 and 49 globally. We have piloted in Niger, Zambia, and Lesotho, first ever surveys that include questions about technology-facilitated gender-based violence, so that we are actively learning from women and girls closest to the problem on what the unique contexts and dimensions of their experiences with digital technologies that are being weaponized by their partners, by their peers, by their acquaintances, or even people that are unknown to them online, so that we can start to build that evidence base and make sure that we have a comprehensive picture on what tech-facilitated GBV looks like, and one that is not fully dominated by the global minority.
I just want to add to that, Caitlin. I think that's so important, because that's one of the things we heard in our original research is some of these solutions are pretty simple. Like, we're hearing from young people, and the importance of low and middle income country voices is like, yes, there are moderators, but in some cases, like, they just don't have the language skills, right, to be able to help in certain communities or geographies. So just the simple solutions like that will be so important for girls. But if we don't have those voices as part of the process, I think folks in Silicon Valley may not even understand how deep the issues run.
Absolutely. And we see that even now as we talk about sort of, training natural language processing models and whose languages are included or not, right? So just a quick shout out to the work of an organization I was looking into recently called Whose Knowledge, because they're trying to make sure that our internet spaces, our digital spaces are in multiple languages, the languages of the majority world, but also the people from those spaces. Caitlin, I'm really glad that you talked a little bit about research, because there was a really good question that was asking sort of what are the research directions we should be going in. And that one, like whose data is missing, because of course, if you have poor quality or huge gaps in your data, then the solutions that you come up with are going to ignore large swathes of people too. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. There was another question that, as I'm just trying to fold in the questions from our audience, that also came up. So if anybody wanted to, to speak to the last one on research and jump in with anything else that might be missing, please do. But another question that came up that actually perhaps should have been where we started. It seems a bit rudimentary, but actually would have been a great place rather to set the conversation from. Somebody asked, what are social media companies doing for safety and what should they be doing? So can we juxtapose? We understand what the young women through the research that was done between CNN and Plan, what they told us they were experiencing. But on the other hand, how do we know how to feel about the work of the platforms? What are they doing and what should they be doing? Who would like to take that question?
I mean, I can speak just sort of on behalf of this conference that I attended, and I think we tend to think of these tech companies as monoliths, and they're all good or all bad or whatever, and they're definitely just the same as in with our nonprofits and our NGOs. We have social protection, we have safeguarding people, we have protection people that don't always have a strong voice at the table as maybe the fundraising teams or the marketing teams or or other teams. And so I think within tech companies, you have teams that are focused on looking at all types of online harms, from everything from white supremacy and terrorist groups to gender-based violence to others. And I think one of the issues is the power within those teams to, because they're fighting against the commercial bottom line, they're fighting against growth and scale, shall we say capitalist models that are kind of like, how do we get as big and as rich as possible, as fast as possible? And that tends to leave a lot of people behind, and it isn't really the best model for kind of an equitative shared space where everyone can have, safe participation. And so I think tech companies are doing something. They're not doing nearly enough, and those teams are not supported enough within those companies to make a difference. And as we said before, there's a lack of investment in languages. There's a lack of investment in in folks that can work in certain countries and certain continents and really understand what's happening. Having said that, I will say there's huge outsourcing of content moderation that happens in the majority world, often quite low paid. How are those folks able to feed into the platforms and sort of explain what some of the really nuanced issues are that young people, that girls, women, LGBTQI folks and others are facing in terms of harassment and discrimination? And so I think there's a lot that could be done. And I see Hikmat has her hand up, so I'm sure she has other ideas as well.
Hikmat, please, let's come to you next. And I would like to fold in a question that we got from one of the audience about engaging men and boys. So it would be really, I think we can say very broad things about it, but again, from your community level, what does that look like as you are advocating for the inclusion of women and girls at the hand of, when we're talking about harms? What do you think about what does it look like within that same community? What is the role for men and boys? Hikmat, can you hear us? Oh no, don't make me repeat all of that. Hikmat, we'll come to you as soon as okay, when your connection comes back, please just chime right in. Otherwise, in the meantime, I'll go to you, Mira, because you also had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So it's actually echoing a bit now of what Linda said, but just that. So in our reporting of the research with Plan, we obviously had to reach out to the platforms, and they did share, as you flagged, like a range of tools and things that they've kind of invented and come up with. So they have flagged that they're doing something in the form of restrictions based on the age of a user, and tools like blurring of kind of nudity that they're testing out. I think some just came in like a few months before the reporting came out. But I think what then kind of experts that we interviewed in this space then stressed was the speed of all of it, which is what Linda stressed as well. The fact that it's just too reactive, that the issue is kind of spiraling out of control, and it's kind of catching parts of it, but not quite doing anything proactive to try and, especially with, it's been flagged around AI. Are they ready for all of the things that are going to come with that, really? And so to move away from that kind of responsive nature to really trying to be more proactive. And, there were some simple things, the way Shannon touched on simplicity. Some of the girls highlighted just the need for things to be a bit more understandable, and for tech platforms to have ways in which they deliver things more clearly as a kind of training across the different, geographies that they dominate, to then just help them be able to better protect themselves through that simple measure. So yeah, I just wanted to share those insights, really. You're muted.
I am. Thank you. No, I was just saying it was really important what you were saying, not least, of course, because as we, for those on the call who are not familiar with the work of As Equals, we start our long series often with what we call listening circles, where we bring, a series of experts together to just understand the issue. And often there we heard what we have heard now, which is there's often a focus on the platforms and not sometimes on government. And governments can also be, bad actors in terms of how they use social media platforms. We had the reporting we did on Uganda talking about, women in politics who are being trolled or doxxed even by men in their own parties. So the people who should be, setting the example and setting the policy are using the tools in this way. So that was really, interesting to come back around to that. Actually, when we think about who are the good or bad actors, it's not always particularly simplistic. As I look to more questions, let's just take what you would like to say, Kaylin, and then I'll see if there are more from the audience.
Great. So I just wanted to say on the engaging men and boys piece, because that's so important to happen at all layers of society, local communities, but also decision-making spaces, and decision-making spaces both in government, but also let's think about these tech companies. They're overwhelmingly led in the upper C-suite by men. And so they need to be engaged and take action in this space as well, as part of how we conceive of the engaging men and boys, really important intervention approach to gender-based violence, but translated to the digital technology sphere. And on that note, I just want to say, today is a really special day at the White House. We are commemorating 30 years of the Violence Against Women Act, which is the landmark law that President Biden, as a senator, authored and created the first ever comprehensive law to take domestic violence, sexual assault outside of what was considered a family matter and into the public domain as a matter of public policy. And today, to mark that occasion, there are a number of AI companies, AI data providers and developers that are making some first ever voluntary commitments today to safeguard their products and their data sets from image-based sexual abuse. They are making commitments for the first time on the occasion of the anniversary of the Violence Against Women Act to exclude known image-based sexual abuse, so both non-consensual intimate images of adults and child sexual abuse material from the data sets that are used to train their models, which is a fundamental step to guard against the ability of AI models to create this content. And this includes the data provider that supplies data to train over 80% of the models that are out there. So we're really hopeful that these will have really impactful downstream effects that will inhibit the ability of bad actors, of users to generate images of women and girls and anybody without their consent. So we're really looking forward to more information on that announcement today, but I did just want to share that coming in. So thank you.
Very journalistic of you, hot off the press. So can I just come to you quickly, Hikmat? I'm very aware, I know we started late, but to be respectful of people's time, I think we should end at time, including all your time, speakers, because I don't know what other commitments you have in your very busy schedules. So Hikmat, if you can please make add the contributions that you wish to, and then you as well, Shauna, and then we can ask the last questions to wrap. Hikmat, please go ahead if you can hear us.
Hello.
We can hear
Hello,
you.
please, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can
We
hear
can hear
you.
you. Oh.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm trying to respond to the question on engaging like boys and men when it comes to girls' online safety. Is that right? Hello?
Yes, please. That's correct.
Yeah, so from my experience, and traditionally, we all know that online safety and gender-based violence issues have been framed as women's issues. So with advocacy primarily led by women and girls. But I think that engaging men and boys help shift the narrative to one where men become active allies, friends, and advocates. And it's also essential to foster the idea that these are human rights issues and not just women's issues. So when men and boys advocate for online safety, they can help change harmful norms, challenge abusive behaviors like toxic masculinity, and also stand up for girls in their communities and online. And from my experience in my community, in as much as I'm even older than my younger brother, but I can say my younger brother has some level of influence more than me. And it's like that in many cultures. Boys and men hold like significant influence, whether in families, peer groups, or communities. And if we are able to tap into that influence, it can help amplify the message of online safety and gender respect. Men and boys have the ability to challenge toxic behaviors, call out harmful attitudes, and also influence their peers in ways that women and girls may struggle to do all by themselves. For instance, in one of our projects, we engaged boys and men. We have a term we call get the boys engaged and get the girls empowered. Using that, we engaged boys and men to help us in advocating for online safety and digital literacy for girls and women in our communities. And it was really like the achievement, or should I say the impact of that project was really wonderful, and we want to keep doing that. So for me, I would say that if we're able to leverage the influence these boys and girls have, boys and men have, we'll be able to tap into that influence to continue amplifying the message of girls safety online. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hikmat. Shana, what would you like to add? There's also a question that I think would be, really interesting to see if from a Plan International perspective. It was just basically about, as you civil society organizations try and put pressure on tech companies, going after the moral case is one way, but also going after the bottom line. Has Plan thought about that, the advertisers who work with tech companies, to kind of help, fold them into the accountability strategy?
No, I think it's great. And I would just add on the engaging men and boys. I wouldn't add much because I think Hikmat's answer was so strong, but the importance of doing that early and often, and why it's important that we don't lose sight of gender equality and focus on equality for all, in whether it's in education programming or economic empowerment programming. These opportunities to bring in boys and men as allies, if we start that when boys are young and build those relationships, we can take advantage of the influence and power and platforms that boys and men have and their willingness to be allies. I think your question about putting pressure on advertisers is great. That isn't something specifically we've taken on as an initiative, but we do often talk to corporate partners, for example, about this issue. And we have found there are more and more like increasing interest rather, in, how this is affecting girls and women and the role that corporations can play in either, the tone of their advertising, how they're working at a community level, and how they're working with the social media organization.
Wonderful. All right, speakers, we have at best 6 minutes, which is just about enough for each of you. I would love to ask you all the question of the title of this panel, which is, are we doing enough? My presumption is, from the things that you have all said, no, there's so much more we can do. But I'm really mindful as the moderator that in under an hour, we couldn't really. This is not a course which you could probably teach for a semester on a subject, right? So I would love if you could leave each of our speakers could leave the 70 people who are still with us with one key idea that you think will be impactful in getting the kind of progress that we wish to see, because all of you said more needs to be done. So I'm going to just start with you, Hikmat, because you're on screen, but if you can take a minute each to just tell us what is the thing that can be done so that if we were having this conversation next year, we would be able to see some real movement forward for online safety for women and girls.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was really wonderful to hear from other people's perspectives. So for me, one thing I really want us to prioritize is collaborating and partnering with youth-led organizations, especially those at the grassroots level. Organizations, tech companies, policymakers, they should see young people as equal partners and not just as program beneficiaries or participants. We are equal partners. They should recognize our perspective, our lived experiences, and they should trust us with their resources. So I think, to end this conversation, trust us with your resources, respect our perspectives, value our contributions, and also give us power. We don't want ageism, we don't want tokenism. Please provide us with resources, and also ensure that you continue to partner with youth-led organizations and young people. Bring them into the decision-making rooms. in as much as we don't want to be like people who are fighting to have a seat at the decision-making tables, because of course, young people, we are people who can actually create our own tables. And in creating our own tables here means that we are leading social change in our communities in every small way that we can. But we need collaborations, partnerships, and the support and trust of individuals and organizations. Thank you.
Hikmat, this Zoom screen does not have emojis because that was fire. I was looking for them and I couldn't find them. So having made Shana go after you the last time, I'm going to pass to Linda this time, Shana, so that there is a bit of distance between. But please, Linda, what would your one tip be or one thought?
Yeah, I think I agree with Hikmat in terms of investment. So I think just talk isn't enough. I think we need resources, especially at civil society level. I think civil society protection and safeguarding teams need to be much more schooled up and empowered and aware of digital protection and quite much more involved in all of these conversations, because safeguarding protection is not what it used to be 10, 20 years ago. And so organizations that are leading the way, I know several of them that are really investing in training their safeguarding and protection teams and working with young people. So I think that's really critical. If we can't trust the platforms to do it, then we're going to have to take it on.
Helen. Helen, can you hear us? Oh, there you go.
Yes, sorry, I was just struggling to find the unmute button. So I wouldn't say this is a new idea per se, but it's one that I want to reinforce, which is that we really do need to shift the burden off of women and girls to account for their own safety online and offline and everywhere in between, for that matter, and onto companies and governments. We need to do that by creating laws and regulations that prioritize real safety concerns and known harms that are gendered in nature in particular, over risking a hypothetical missed opportunity to innovate. We really do need to change and shift back this Overton window. Otherwise, we risk so much, and we are seeing so much at stake. Again, Plan's own pioneering research has shown it's not just the individual safety and well-being of young women and girls, it's also our democracies and who gets to be at the table in leading those future democracies if they are to be sustained, which we believe they are. We do believe they are, and we have great hope and confidence in that. But it will take all of us to keep that. We can't take this for granted by any means. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylin, and congratulations on that anniversary that you're celebrating today. Mira, as the media partner that produced the research, what would you like to leave us on? And then we will close with Shana.
Well, I'd like to echo, the two things that were raised, the need to bring in, and we've spoken about this, the need to bring in the views of girls, because genuinely the ideas that were shared in those focus groups, some of which were things that platforms then incorporated. So the mindset is actually similar about what's effective, but also, the girls actually spoke about incorporating boys more as well, right? And for the role that their role in the internet life in general. And then I think, so just in addition to that, taking, as Kaylin said, taking the burden off the girls, because we have a great quote in the story that's like, if you're receiving certain photos every day, why is it the onus on you to have to spend every day of your life having to deal with that, right? And then fight for people to stop you having to see that every day. And then I'll just add that there was this real desire for adults, like parents, teachers, to know more. And as a parent, that kind of really struck me that actually I should really make sure that I know everything about this realm as well, to really be able to help any of the young people that I meet or my own kids and so on. So just that, again, taking that burden off them, but also, put everyone in that world that can help keep people safe.
Thank you. And finally, Shana.
Thank you. I will just echo the importance of the voices of young people and not tokenistic engagement with young people, but real young people, youth engagement in everything from research, like this research, to product development, to policy frameworks, marketing. It will not only make all of these things stronger, it'll make them better, right? They'll be better products, and organizations will be more successful. you can be profitable and strong on equality for women and girls. And the last thing, I would echo something that Kaylin said about measuring or balancing between this idea of some innovation that we don't know of yet that's out there. We need to make some moves, right? Like the Kids Online Safety and Privacy Act. Is it going to be perfect? No, but we can't. This is one of those situations where we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. And any regulatory framework for any new technology or idea over time has evolved, and we have to recognize these things will evolve over time, but that shouldn't be an excuse it shouldn't be an excuse that keeps us from taking real action to protect girls and women.
Thank you, Shauna. And thank you all. It was really a pleasure of mine to have had a small hand in this, to have read the journalism that came out, to have seen the report, which is titled Building Digital Resilience, that Plan International has put out also, and to have become more familiar with the work of all of our speakers. I hope the audience will go out and look out for more of what they're doing and collaborate with them. I'm really struck here by how, as you have said, Shauna, it is important to take action and to start somewhere, because obviously otherwise we cannot get to the change. We can't push back that Overton window, as Kaylin said. So thank you all again. Again, my apologies for the tech issues we had at the start. Thank you to Jennifer Klein for her opening remarks. And yeah, just wish you all a really wonderful Thursday. I look forward to seeing the work continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.